As always, on the end day, I like to talk about anime that I have dropped. And this year, with Bleach coming back to TV for the first time in a decade, I want to talk about how I ended up dropping it the first time around. So let's flash back to around 2008 to 2009. This was a dark time for shonen fans because Shonen Jump's big three, Bleach, Naruto, and One Piece, were all being heavily fillerized. And I guess the one silver lining for all this is that the industry seems to have learned its lesson because all the shonen anime since then have taken a vastly different approach. Take a look at the past decade. Shows like Attack on Titan, Demon Slayer, Kimetsu no Yaiba, My Hero Academia, Jujutsu Kaisen, all these shows are doing one proper season at a time and taking a break in between until they are ready to make that next season. They're not going to throw on garbage filler in the meantime just to try to stay relevant. What they might do instead is have filler movies or spin-off OVAs, but those are at least easy enough to ignore. The main TV series remains pure. But I couldn't say the same for the big three back then. And they each, funnily enough, they took different approaches. You had One Piece that just spread out the manga as much as possible to try to adapt it as slowly as possible. Then you had Naruto doing these one-shot episodes or short mini arcs in which they focused on side characters, and these episodes were the absolute worst of them all. Then you had Bleach, which took a long-form approach. They made these arcs that were about 20 episodes long that had a continuous plot, and of the three, I found these the easiest to stomach because at least it felt like they were trying. It felt like they weren't really insulting their audience, even though these were admittedly kind of bad. So I sat through two of these longer arcs. The first one was the Bount arc right after Soul Society, which was from episodes 64 to 91. The next one was the New Captain Shusuke Amagai arc from episode 168 to 189. Along the way, they did have some one-shot filler episodes, kind of like Naruto, the most famous of which, in my opinion, was episode 129, entitled, say it with me, The Swooping Descent of the Dark Emissary, The Propagation of Malice. The greatest title of anything ever made, even though the episode itself was pretty bad. But here's the problem with Bleach filler compared to the others. When Naruto made filler and they introduced new characters, once the filler arcs were over, they pretended those characters never existed, they never brought them back. What Bleach did, they stood by their filler. Even when they got back to the real manga-based arcs, they would occasionally have flashbacks to like Karya, his lines with his dialogue with Ichigo from the Bount arc, or sometimes you'd see those little stuffed animals from the Bount arc walking around in the background for some reason, just wasting everyone's time. This was kind of annoying, and that's the problem. It was okay for these arcs to be kind of bad, but it was not okay for them to be annoying, and that's what did them in for me. Now, what I want to talk about right here, this girl from the Shusuke Amagai arc, Rurichio-sama. By now, I've forgotten most of the characters' names on Bleach. Of the Gote 13, I've forgotten probably half the captains' names and most of the lieutenants' captains' names, but this filler girl, Rurichio-sama, I will never forget her name because she was so damn annoying. When she first appeared in the Shusuke Amagai arc, she just seemed like a normal character. Okay, I can tolerate her. But eventually she became the face, the mainstay of Bleach filler comedy hijinks. She was always frolicking about, annoying everyone around her, everyone screaming, Rurichio-sama, you can't do that, Rurichio-sama, please. My theory on why they gave this girl so much screen time is that they were trying to capitalize on that younger girl demographic. You look at the cast of characters of Bleach, it's mostly adults and teenagers. Now there was one major exception, and that was Captain Hitsugaya, who was a hit with younger boys, and because of that they were constantly voting him up to the top of the character popularity polls. When editors see that, they take note and they force him in to make sure that he has as much screen time as possible, which I think he was a perfectly good character, but he was overused. Now, they did the same thing in the anime with Rurichio-sama, except she wasn't a good character and she came from the filler, but they still grabbed onto her and refused to let go. I think they could have done better perhaps with Ichigo's younger sisters, who had potential, but the show never really went into that. Kenpachi's lieutenant was a little girl, but I don't think there was much potential there. She didn't seem that interesting. Nell was a little girl, and she was also really annoying, so I guess Rudichio-sama is what they had to work with. But I thought that would all end when the Shusuke Amagai arc was finally over. But I was wrong, and that's ultimately why I dropped the show. I lasted until episode 205. Now, just 2 episodes before that, the show had so much promise. Episode 203, the title was Karakura Town Gathers, Aizen versus Shinigami. And that's exactly what I want to see out of Bleach. Boss fights, sword fights, bankai, some cool looking characters, and instead, they followed it up with Episode 204, Ichigo's Seppuku Persuasion Strategy, and Episode 205, Thump, a Keimari tournament filled with hollows. In these 2 episodes, they brought back Rudichio-sama, not to fight or anything, but instead to run a soccer-style tournament using Keimari balls. And what they did was they gathered in a whole bunch of side characters, once again, not to fight with each other, but to use their powers to play soccer and to make this little girl fulfill her dreams. That was my breaking point. I was sick of it. I never wanted to see Rudichio-sama ever again, and I couldn't trust the anime to keep her out of these would-be canon episodes. So what I decided what I was going to do is I was just going to wait until all of the anime finished airing, and then I would follow a filler guide. I would go back and only watch the episodes that were confirmed to be true canon episodes. But here's the problem with that. I was reading the manga, and the manga kind of ended as a train wreck for various reasons. Tite Kubo was basically at odds with his editors, and he started mailing it in. The audience gradually lost interest, and the manga was canceled ahead of its time. So they had to rush the ending, and it was kind of a disaster. So that kind of killed my interest in going back to watch the anime. Now that 10 years have passed, and they're doing this new anime, I'm willing to give it a chance, but I hope the new anime actually does deviate from the manga and is able to realize perhaps Tite Kubo's vision for what should have happened in that last arc. But the one thing I hope they don't do is bring back any of the filler characters, including Rudichio-sama.